everybody, and good Wednesday evening to you. It is 21 News Chief Meteorologist Eric Wilhelm here with Weather for Weather Geeks. We've got so much to get to. Let's not waste any time this evening. Before we get to the snow forecast for Thursday and the cold outlook for next week, let's do some reviewing because we are now halfway through January and therefore halfway through meteorological winter. The months of December, January, and February. Our average high here on January the 15th is 34. It's as low as it gets. These averages bottoming out right now. They start rising ever so slowly towards the end of the month and into February, of course, as well. So we're halfway through the season. Here's where we've been. The number at the Youngstown Warren Airport, and all these numbers, of course, are valid at our official reporting station at the airport. 1 degree colder than average through the first 6 weeks of winter. Now, December was a warmer than average month, but January, of course, has not been. But through today's date, from December 1st through today's date, 1 degree colder than the average. That's a full 8 degrees colder than that same time period last winter. So, of course, this winter has been much, much different than last winter so far. 24.4 inches worth of snow. That's a lot more than last winter, but it's still behind average by 4.3 inches. Total precipitation, rain and melted snow, 4.66. That's pretty much par for the course through the first half of winter. I do my annual winter forecast in early November every year, and this year I got off on the wrong foot. I had the wrong idea as to how this winter would kind of progress. Part of that, looking back, if I could do it over again, I would certainly do some things differently. But part of it was kind of unforeseeable in that La Nina in the Pacific Ocean decided not to really get its act together until pretty late in the game, and that was not well forecast by any meteorologists or weather forecast systems out there, weather modeling. So I made some revisions about a month later in early December, and here's that early December forecast, the odds of certain outcomes. We put the strongest odds of temperatures this winter being near to above average. This is where we are right now. We're at -1 right now. We're teetering on the edge of kind of the categories towards the top of this ledger. And so far, it's been a colder than average winter. In terms of snowfall, our forecast was for the strongest odds being close to average, the next closest odds being a little below average. Now, this forecast so far so good, and I don't see any reason to doubt that the final outcome this winter will stray too far from the number here in terms of snowfall, because I don't see any big snow events anytime real soon. That is for sure. Temperatures, a little bit of a different call. We'll talk about February in just a second, but here's where we are so far this season in terms of snowfall. Of course, in the green colors up in the snow belts, that's 80 inches or more. There's been triple-digit amounts and even 120-plus inches from parts of Erie County, PA, up into southwest New York, around and south of Buffalo. In our viewing area, the heaviest amounts, as you would expect, have been kind of in the secondary snow belt, which roughly kind of goes like this, covering parts of Trumbull and Mercer counties. There's been some places that have seen upwards of 40 or 50 inches worth of snow so far this winter, and that's not only above average in those locations, but it's a big change compared to a year ago. When we compare this winter to last winter, when you get into some of these real deep blues and even purples, that's off my legend here. That's more than 30 inches more than we had last winter through today's date, and that includes all the main snow belts of northeast Ohio, northwestern Pennsylvania, and southwestern New York as well. Around our TV viewing area, I'll zoom in a little bit here, and in our TV viewing area specifically, we're running above last year's totals everywhere, but the highest totals compared to last year, again, in areas mostly north of Interstate 80. We've done real well, though, down here in this kind of stripe from southwestern Lawrence County, southeastern Mahoning County, and the northern half of Columbiana as well. That's been another kind of hot spot for the snow so far this season. When we compare the numbers at the airport specifically, we're at 24.4 for the season. 13.6 is what we had through today's date last winter. Now, all of last winter, we only had 30-something, I think, at the airport. So we're going to beat that pretty easily this winter, even though, again, I don't suspect that this is going to end up being a remarkably snowy winter. It's going to be more cold than snow, particularly in the short term. Now, let's look forward. What I did as part of this exercise and looking forward is I took the coldest, or I took all the cold Januaries, I should say, since 2000. All the Januaries since 2000 that have been cold here locally. And then I took a look at what happened in February after those cold Januaries. Two different graphics here. This graphic shows all of the Februaries. that followed cold Januaries. And as you can see, cold continued into February more often than not when you look at all those years put together. But when you exclude certain years and only include La Nina winters, which we are in right now, you get a different story. The La Nina Februaries were milder. Despite a cold January, the cold was more reserved for the northern plains in those winters. And from the Ohio Valley on east, February had a different outcome. And that's La Nina. That's a signature of La Nina. A lot of times La Ninas have a warmer end to the season in February. And that's where I think we are heading this year as well. Some specifics here locally. The 4 years that had a cold January and February were 2003, 2010, 2014, 2015. None of those years were La Ninas. The 4 La Ninas were 2009, 2011, 2018, 2022, and all those La Nina winters were not, all those La Nina Februaries, I should say, were not particularly cold. A couple of pretty average ones and then a couple of pretty warm ones. Our two most recent La Ninas, 2018, 2022, we had warm Februaries. 2011, 2009, 2004 were not quite as warm, but they were not very cold either. So I kind of suspect, based on history and based on some of the modeling going forward, the weather modeling, that February is going to have a different outcome. Now, is it going to be a blowtorch? I'm skeptical of that. I would lean against that. But I do think that February has a good chance of at least being pretty close to average and maybe even warmer than the average by some margin, and quite a a change compared to this frigid month of January that we're in the middle of right now. All right, let's talk about snow coming up. It doesn't look like much on our radar. This is our Clipper system that's getting set to pivot in, and this will pick up some strength overnight as it digs into the lower Great Lakes states. And in anticipation of that, the National Weather Service offices here locally have hoisted winter weather advisories for just about all of eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania as well. What we did with our snow forecast for tomorrow is, we're concentrating more on the 3. We had a 1 to 3 inch range yesterday for this system. I think an inch is pretty much a lock in most of the area at this point. Even 2 inches looks pretty likely. I think a lot of us are going to be towards the top end of that 1 to 3 inch range. Now, this isn't all coming at once. Don't expect 3 inches to be on the ground in many locations by noon tomorrow. It's going to start snowing before daybreak, and it may not be completely over until well into the evening tomorrow. But when the snow tapers off finally Thursday evening, a lot of us are going to see a fresh few inches worth of snow. So we're looking for travel impacts. Now, it's going to be real cold tomorrow morning when the snow pushes in at 5, 6, 7 a.m. It'll still be in the teens. Every flake can stick. And so impacts will start right away with this. The ground will be whitened, and anybody heading off to work in the morning, you're going to find some tricky travel conditions. Now, in the afternoon, temperatures will warm up through the 20s, actually warmer than the last couple of days. That will help road treatment be a little more effective, even though the snow rates may pick up again towards late afternoon. I think there might be a little bit of a lull right around midday, early afternoon, where it's either not snowing at all or it's snowing at a lower rate. It's not snowing as heavily. But that should pick back up as we head towards dinner time. And so at the start of the day and towards daybreak, or sunset, I should say, could be our roughest portions of the day on area roads. Here's our model depiction of the snow pushing in first thing in the morning. Here's 2, 3 in the afternoon. This model depiction shows some snow, but it may be a little bit lighter than it was for a chunk of the morning before picking back up in intensity late afternoon, early evening as our front moves in, the colder air starts pushing in, and then everything kind of quiets down. Actually, we have a decent day coming up on Friday with clouds breaking for some sunshine. This will be a day to enjoy because the rest of our forecast is not so great. Now, the cold air isn't quite here yet on Saturday. In fact, on Saturday, it'll be warm enough for wet snow and perhaps a wintry mix at times. There may be a small slushy accumulation of snow Saturday, particularly first thing in the morning before any changeover or mixing occurs. But I think there probably will be some mixing and maybe even a changeover to rain before the morning is through. And therefore, we're not real concerned about any sort of sizable snow accumulations at all with this Saturday system. It'll just be a pretty gloomy, damp start to the weekend. And then the story more and more becomes the cold as we go into next week. Daybreak wind chills. Yikes, some ugly numbers here. We're talking wind chills of 10 to 20 below, perhaps even a little bit lower than that. Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning especially, but even wind chills Monday morning. Now, a lot of people have Monday off for MLK Day, and so that's not a day to worry about school adjustments, but school adjustments Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, yeah, I'm no expert so when it comes to predicting what the schools are going to do, but that seems like a pretty safe bet at this point. So, I touched on this some in recent videos, but you may not be aware that the National Weather Service in recent times has altered some of their wording and some of their product names, and they've eliminated certain products. We no longer call these wind chill advisories or wind chill warnings. Instead, they're cold weather advisories and extreme cold warnings. And the criteria for the issuance of these products around most of our area, for the cold weather advisory, it's a wind chill of 15 below or lower than that to about 24 below for at least 3 hours. In other words, it can't just hit that and then bounce back up again. It needs to be in that range for at least 3 hours. An extreme cold warning issued for wind chills of minus 25 and lower for 3 or more hours. These are the criteria for the counties that the National Weather Service office in Cleveland covers, which is roughly half our area. But Mercer County, even though Pittsburgh Weather Service covers that county, they have the same criteria as Cleveland counties that are a little farther to the north. The criteria a little bit different for Lawrence County and Columbiana County in our viewing area, but we're splitting hairs here. But hey, it's weather for weather geeks, so sometimes we split hairs and talk about these things. But either way, yeah, it looks darn cold next week. Here's a look at one model depiction of all the real estate that will be covered by 0 degrees or lower as far as the actual air temperature Tuesday morning. You can see almost all of Ohio, and a good chunk of central and western Pennsylvania should be below 0 Tuesday morning, and probably Wednesday morning as well. Do I think we hit minus 10 or lower in terms of our actual temperature? I doubt it. Here's one model depiction of everyone who should be 10 below or lower Tuesday morning, and I think that'll be mostly reserved for the upper Midwest and, of course, up into Canada as well. I don't think our actual air temperatures will get that cold around here. Some models are trying to say that, but I kind of think that's an outlier at this point. Either way, this is pipe burst kind of cold. This is car batteries dying kind of cold. It's kind of cold that we haven't had very much in recent winters, of course. And so make sure that you are ready. Make sure your car is in good shape, your home is in good shape to withstand a few days of pretty extreme cold temperatures during the first half of next week. Thanks for hanging with me on this long Wednesday evening edition of Weather for Weather Geeks. Stay safe if you are going to be out and about traveling on Thursday. We'll have you updated on air and online, of course, this evening and right through the day on Thursday. And we'll keep talking about the cold and its potential impacts for next week in future editions of this video.